just try to provide value. That's my goal. All the spaces that I'm in, anywhere I'm at, whether it's personally, physically, or online, digitally, I'm trying to provide value. So ultimately, that leads to jobs. If people see you as somebody who provides a lot of value, who gives a lot of information away for free, is trying to be helpful, that makes people more comfortable hiring you for jobs, because you're giving this away for free, so you're showing your expertise there. And so again, like, that was the big thing, is kind of shifting from this idea of, full-time employment is not as stable as people like to make it out to be. you know but I think the biggest thing that I found from going from building these really fast, small brochure type websites to building on Shopify is I never had to convince people to spend money on their website in Shopify, right? Like, people either already have all these ideas where they want to spend money because their Shopify website makes them.
And like I like to say, name by like let's say WordPress. So WordPress client will not have the same budget as a Shopify client. Try in your luck, because you don't know which article, which Twitter post you will like get viral or like a get lead from that. So you just need to be active, trying your best.
So that you have to, when you're freelancing, get used to this idea of, like, you're in the spotlight. You are the face of your business, and those sorts of things. And so you have to get comfortable with that. It's very uncomfortable, but you have to get comfortable with it. And so that was one that was very impactful to me, both in the career as a freelancer, but also just helping really open up my knowledge to a lot of these different things that we could be working on in Shopify specifically.
So welcome guys to the 5th episode of Yalla Let's Code podcast, a podcast where I interview software engineers to share their entrepreneurial story. So we are in the 5th episode and we have another guest from the Shopify space. And this podcast is not only for Shopify developer, but our guests have a specific Shopify related podcast that we can introduce later on. But I would like to introduce our guest, which is Taylor. As your Twitter bio said, going from a former social worker to a Shopify developer and web developer, a founder of the Page Media Agency, and a co-founder of the Shopify Dev Alliance, which is a Shopify developer freelance community. So let's first of all, you can give us a bit information about yourself, so you can introduce yourself, and from that we can start the episode. So you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, I say you kind of nailed it. As far as like the intro, the Twitter bio kind of says it all, right? So I used to be a social worker, and now I'm here, kind of type thing. So my day to day, I get to work with Shopify merchants, helping extend Shopify themes specifically. So I'm primarily in the theme space. I've dabbled in apps, but I'm definitely not an expert yet at providing custom app dev. Things like checkout extensions, things of that nature. But yeah, that's what I get to do from a day-to-day basis. I've been freelancing now full-time for the past several years, where it's been my full-time thing. For a while, I did what was called just side hustling, and I'm sure we can talk, a little bit more about that, where I just kind of, had a totally different career field, was doing this kind of on the side for a while, hoping to try to eventually break into web development. And Shopify just ended up being the key to all of that. Started finding regular, consistent work, started figuring out how I could provide value in this space, and things just really, really took off from there. So very, very grateful to be in the position that I'm in.
Awesome. Thank you for your introduction, Taylor. And the first question that I have for you is, how has been the transition from a social worker to being a web developer?
Yeah, for sure. So initially it was kind of hard, right? Anytime you're going from one thing to the next, and it always feels like it's taking longer than it should. Everything feels like it takes so long during a transition period like that. And so like I said, I went to school for a very long time, paid a lot of money to get an advanced degree in psychology so I could be this social worker. Thought I'd just, get a job and that be the thing for the rest of my life. And like as far as transitioning goes, from that position, eventually I kind of got introduced to web development, working on WordPress, in another role that I was working on, and just thought it was so cool. Started learning stuff on the side, just for fun, really, just to kind of, advance myself in that regard. And, then I figured out, how much money web developers make, and, this kind of like lifestyle you could build, where you've got all this freedom and flexibility, as opposed to, most of my jobs were very tied down, to an office where you're having to go somewhere and work directly with people, or something along those lines. So I really, really liked that idea. And then I had kids. And, so this idea of having more freedom and flexibility in my schedule became very, very appealing. So that transition initially just looked like me, I'm working, probably 50, sometimes 60 hours a week at the time as a supervisor in the social work world. And then I'd come home on nights and weekends and just, learn to code stuff in between, changing diapers with little kids and, late night stuff. So, and it really started off kind of small. My goal at first was to get a job at an agency. I figured that was the best way to learn. But it's hard to get hired when you don't have experience, right? And so that part was really hard, just getting that initial experience. And so I started freelancing to get experience. And after I kind of got a taste of that, that's all I wanted to do was freelance. That part initially was pretty rough, starting off, trying to make that transition. But finally, we got to the point where I had work coming in regularly, and my wife and I sat down and talked about, hey, this is very viable. So the good thing is, good and bad, social workers don't make a lot of money. And so it wasn't actually really hard to replace my full-time income as a social worker, even part-time as a web developer. And so, we got to the point where I was like, hey, I was making better money here. And so we were able to step into that, which was pretty lonely and scary, right? When you're making that big of a transition. But it ended up working out, and so I'm grateful for that. But yeah, definitely the transition part, very scary.
Yeah. At which age we are talking about when you like make the decision of transition to being a web developer?
Oh man. Well, I wanted to be a web developer, like do that full time for like years before I actually kind of made that transition. So I started building websites and stuff back in 2014, so 10 years ago now. And I didn't think it was a viable career option for me necessarily, probably until, I don't know, probably 3 or so years into that. So probably 2017, I thought I'm going to start just working really hard to get a job as a web developer. And like I said, at the time, I thought that was at an agency. So since 2007, so probably about 7 years, I was like really trying to be a web developer. Kind of got over the notion of, um, hey, I spent a lot of money getting a master's degree and a lot of time, like years of my life, right, trying to get a degree in this field. And so it was that was part of it. It was kind of hard to leave that, thinking like I invested all this time and money into a totally different field. So yeah, about 7 years ago was probably when I really started focusing down on, I want to get a job as a web developer. I don't want to be a social worker anymore. And I would have been, let's see, 7 years ago. So I'm 35 now, so 28. Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned that the transition was during you being a dad. So how difficult it was, like with all the responsibility that you have as a dad, switching from like having a stable income that go through each month to being
Mm-hmm.
a web developer.
Yeah, so that part, especially, yeah, this the idea of stable income versus not stable income when you're freelancing, right? And you read and hear
Yeah.
about all these people talking about freelancing or running your own business where it's feast or famine. So you've got this up and down with, sometimes you've got a ton of work, sometimes you get no work, and so trying to make sure that you're prepared for that. So the way that, well, I guess two things kind of happened with that to make that transition better. Because I was very worried about that initially, especially like I said, like when I actually made the switch. I then at that point had two kids and a mortgage, so I've got a house payment, and I'm trying to make sure I'm making the best decisions for my family, not just what I want to do, but also what's going to help take care of my family. And so that part was, it was hard to get over initially, but basically when my wife and I sat down and talked about it, and it was really helpful. I should say maybe first and foremost, so three things maybe, just having a supportive partner or spouse. So when you're in that position where you do have family to take care of and other people, just having someone that's very supportive is huge. And so when we sat down and talked about it, that was my big thing. Like, hey, as a social worker, especially as a male, so in especially in the United States, as a male social worker, it's pretty hard to get fired because it's mainly a female dominant field, and depending on the population of people that you work with, sometimes you work with people for whatever reason or another, either due to aggression or other maybe problems. Maybe they can't work with females, or they just don't work as well with females. And so those would typically get tasked to then a male like myself. And I'm not a small fellow, so I'm about 6 foot tall and 250 pounds. So it's not it was a thing that, oh, hey, great. Like when we have these situations, we can refer a male to. So it's one of those where not only is it a pretty stable field, but it is one where, you know, just in my position, it's one where it's not likely that I'm going to lose my job, kind of type thing, even more so. So moving from that to people talking about just this notion of you know stability with income. Uh, Initially my thought was with freelancing it's less stable, but then I actually heard several other people who've been in business for a long time and freelancing and stuff like this. My idea on that kind of shifted, because their suggestion was more so, well, yeah, like if you're with an employer and they make some bad decisions and the company goes broke, like you're out of a job and you have to find a new job, versus when you work for yourself and you're freelancing, you're completely responsible for clients, right? Like you just go out and if you lose one client or two or something happens, you go get more clients. And so that part obviously is not so simple, but the responsibility of that being on me in my own strengths and capabilities and abilities definitely made me feel better. And so again, like that was the big thing, is kind of shifting from this idea of, full-time employment is not as stable as people like to make it out to be. you know and as long as you set yourself up for success, freelancing can be like very stable. And a big part of that too, there's a couple of strategies really that I recommend to folks when they're starting, when they're making that transition, and that's primarily having savings. So you've got a backup plan of some sort. So some people call it an emergency fund, or something along those lines, but it's some kind of notion or idea of, if you make $0, right, for a month or two, that you'd be able to sustain yourself to some degree, right? And so, having a strategy for that, but then also on top of that, because freelancing can be feast or famine. Sometimes you've got a bunch of invoices that get paid one month, and then for whatever reason or another, maybe those invoices don't get paid in the following month, and you have to remind people, hey, I need to get paid, please pay the invoice or whatever. And so maybe you get paid, you get a whole month where you don't get those payments, but they come in the next month. So what I do or recommend is I consistently pay myself the same amount every single month. So I have money that stays in my business account, that helps me pay for anything else, like, whether it's software that I use and different things like that. That all stays there so I can pay the business bills. And then the money that I pay to myself, I pay myself like I'm an employee of my own company, and I only pay myself the same amount every single month. So providing yourself that kind of stability too, it doesn't really matter, if your income goes up and down, because you're paying yourself the same every single month. So I think if you try to kind of treat it that way, I think that helps mitigate a lot of those problems with that, the instability versus stability. You create your own stability, basically. So, which is the benefit of running your own business, right? Like anytime you have a problem, you get to come up with solutions for that. Sometimes that's a hard and thing to do and not so great, and sometimes it's a really great thing to do. So, for freelancers or entrepreneurs, anybody who's seeing that instability in income, just create strategies to create stability, and you'll be fine.
You mentioned a lot of good points about especially like a stability as a full-time employee versus a freelancer. And I think the notion of stability, it's relative, because you might be stable as a freelancer but not as a full-time. So I think there's a lot of things that to do with money management. So you need to have a good skill of managing your money as a full-time employee or as a
Yeah.
freelancer. This is will make you stand out, and also it will make, as you mentioned, even if you are a freelancer, you will have a stable income. As you mentioned, that you set yourself a fixed salary each month. So the second question that I would like to ask, like especially for Shopify folks, like a Shopify guest, what is special about Shopify that you choose Shopify? By the way, this podcast is not sponsored by Shopify, and I would like to get your opinion about what is special about Shopify that you are special only as a Shopify expert.
Yeah. So the thing that I think was different about Shopify. So I started when I was, like I said, my first initial introduction to web development was WordPress. Okay. Well, I shouldn't say that. I actually took a class in high school, but I didn't understand it enough. I didn't understand how capable and amazing the web was, just because it was like a basic HTML class, and I didn't connect the dots, so I didn't get it. So when I first really understood what could be built on the web was with WordPress, and so I was helping fix like this broken, hacked site. And I thought it was amazing, like all the stuff you could do. And so I transitioned from that to I really got into Jamstack methodology. So this whole idea of building websites with JavaScript APIs and markup, and so like Gatsby JS, Next.js, and using lots of these different CMSs as well, like Sanity and stuff like that. I thought that was really really cool that you could build these very fast websites, and those sorts of things. And so I really got into that for a while. That was kind of my jam, and I didn't realize people would actually pay you to work on Shopify websites. So I ran a Shopify website at one point with my wife. We were trying to sell these funny little coffee mugs. That was my introduction to Shopify, and to me, it was just kind of like your standard CMS. So I didn't realize people would actually pay for this, and so I was like, this is great. This is cool. We didn't make any money. Like we sold like one coffee mug the whole year. Like terrible at the marketing and all that stuff or whatever that you need to do that. So that's not what I get into. But it helped me introduce me to that. And so when I first worked on a job for Shopify, it was actually for a friend in a web development group who needed some help. And after I helped him out, it was like real simple stuff, just kind of like conditionally rendering some stuff with Liquid based on a customer tag kind of type thing. And I realized, okay, like there's actually a lot of potential here. And so after I started trying to get jobs on Shopify, I realized there was so much room and in the ability for people that where they just need that little bit of extra help. And so I just was able to start getting work relatively quickly because I had the skills to connect the dots from like just that little bit of extra space there that people needed to go in order to make the website their own, which is I think what Shopify tries to do, right, to some degree. But when you've got a theme, it can only go so far. Or even just working with theme dev or app devs. I'm sorry. That was some folks, a couple of jobs I did early on was just communicating between the developer and the merchant because they didn't know how to explain their problem to the app developer because the app developer doesn't speak merchant. They speak like developer, right? And so I can speak both languages. So I can communicate with the merchant and I can communicate with the developer. And so sometimes that was just my main value add first starting out. But I think the biggest thing that I found from going from building these really fast, small brochure type websites to building on Shopify is I never had to convince people to spend money on their website in Shopify, right? Like people either already have all these ideas where they want to spend money because their Shopify website makes them money versus if you're trying to talk to somebody else about building kind of this brochure site or even landing pages kind of type thing, it's hard to communicate the value add if they don't already believe that the website is going to help make them money. In Shopify, they're already used to it. So as far as the difference between I think why I started to see a lot of movement there was primarily because I didn't understand early on. I was trying to sell people solutions to problems they didn't realize existed, right? And so in Shopify, people are already very aware of like what kind of problems they have. They already see Shopify as the solution. So now it's just your job as a developer to connect the dots on how to make that happen. So yeah, biggest thing I think is because Shopify, you don't need to tell people like your website's going to make you money. Shopify is already doing that for them, with or without you as a developer. Your job is just to help them make more money, right?
Being a Shopify developer freelancer, the quality of the Shopify merchant are higher than other like an e-commerce platform. Let's say I
Mhm.
wouldn't like to say name, but let's say WordPress. So WordPress client will not have the same budget as a Shopify client. Just to be able to compare this like a both like a big CMS. The other question that I would like to have to ask you about is how did you get your first Shopify client?
Yeah, so I mean, so outside of like, so the free work that I would have done for the one guy in the web developer group was my first time working on somebody else's Shopify site, and I mean, to be fair, he offered to pay me, but it was like I said, it was like pretty quick, and he wrote me a very nice review afterwards, which was helpful as I was starting to freelance. So that was its own weight in gold there. So there was that, but the first probably like actually money changed hands kind of type job for Shopify was a on Upwork actually. So I got a job at the time. I'd been trying to apply for all these other jobs and trying to pitch all these different types of website solutions. And then, like I said, after I kind of had that one experience where I helped the one individual in the web development group, I was like, okay, like people actually pay for like work on their Shopify site. So I'm going to go ahead and try to start getting Shopify jobs on Upwork. And I'm sure it's different now. I don't really get jobs on Upwork now because I've gotten to the point where I don't need a platform to help me do that. But that initially early on was how I got my first job. So my first job was just doing a couple of real simple things. It was one of those jobs where they had a bundler app and they were having trouble communicating to the developer. It was like a pretty new app, and the developer was trying to work with the merchant. But the merchant was trying to communicate the problems that they were having and what they were wanting to see the bundler app do. And the merchant or the app developer was trying to communicate how to configure the app properly to get it done. But they were having kind of trouble connecting there. So I kind of came in with that. They had a couple of things where they wanted customizations to existing sections on their theme at the time, vintage Shopify themes. So I think it was probably debut or something like that kind of type thing. So a couple of small things like that between configuring the app, building them a couple of customizations in existing sections to give them some more controls and different things like that. So that was my very first job was on Shopify was thanks to Upwork actually. Yeah.
Awesome. And how many Shopify developer project that you get from when you switch from a platform like Upwork to your own
Mm-hmm.
agency? How many dev project does it take you to be able to do the switch?
Um, I don't know about the number of projects. So I made about 10 grand on Upwork before I made that switch. As far as the number of projects, I'm trying to think. It might have been 20, maybe more than that. Um, and some of them were smaller, some of them were bigger. As far as like what that looked like, but I basically what I did that whole time was I worked on trying to set up this other idea of like funnels, right? So in different kinds of sales and things like that, you've got basically just different places you can find work. And so Upwork was one funnel, and then I was working on like all these other funnels where I could start getting work before I moved out of that. So I think, and so as far as like how much time, it was probably about 10 months on Upwork, just getting jobs from Upwork before I stopped even checking Upwork at all, because I was getting jobs from other places.
Awesome. And I think after being in Upwork, you start the page media agency. Is that right?
Yeah, so well, it's not really it's not really an agency so much so as my tax guy told me what I needed to do is I need to set up an LLC or a company to do all of my billing through, right? And so I market or position myself as a freelancer, but all of my billing and everything goes through the Pages Media. So it's an agency in the sense that it's a company that kind of like represents who I am, but I still market myself as a freelancer, if that makes sense. It's kind of confusing. I feel like I should probably be able to explain that better.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah,
Okay.
it does make
Okay.
sense because I have similar situation to you because it's just
Yeah.
the agency is just the legal storefront or just the
Yep.
legal stuff, but it's like a one man agency.
Yeah. Basically. Yeah. Exactly. Yep. One man agency. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah,
Although I do have my
awesome.
wife actually works with me now a little bit. She does some UX stuff, so user experience kind of type things, and so she does her own. She has her own clients, but we both bill through that. She helps me out with some projects now, which is really cool. I've looked forward. That's been a goal for a long time to be able to work with my wife in the business. So I'm happy I get to do that now.
Awesome. Awesome. I love that. I love like that your wife is already in the same space as you. It's not the same space, but
Hmm.
in similar spaces. Like you can collaborate on a project with your wife,
Yes.
which is really good.
Yes. Yeah.
I would like to ask you maybe this question about a project that is related to Shopify. This is special to you in terms of complexity, in terms of
Mhm.
impact, also.
Yeah. So a special project, like one that I'm doing right now, or one that I've done.
Like you can if it's like it's already done, you can share it. If
Hmm.
it's like the one that you are working on, like it's special, you can share it also. That
Yeah. So, well, one. So, as far as one, probably a big one that was really impactful for my career here, like freelancing and getting into Shopify development, probably was a job that I got with a they weren't a plus agency at the time. They were actually just a larger organization that had 5 different brands on Shopify, and they eventually did transition to plus after we kind of like talked through that and moved through that process. But the really was involved with learning more about speed optimization on Shopify. So at the time, this was several years ago, where Google moved away from this whole idea or concept of just speed or whatever kind of type thing to where they have these like core web vitals, which is what we talk about now when we're talking about speed optimization, and it's been that way for the past several years. And so that was my initial. I'd worked on improving speed on websites previously in other platforms, but not on Shopify specifically. And in this instance, it was a job with this larger organization to do this with 5 different brands. So we had, these 5 different brands, kind of type thing where we were trying to basically get them all up to meeting the standards for this. So that way they weren't going to be impacted by rankings. Okay. That was the big deal at that time, just for me, because it helped actually lend itself. Once we got all these improved, I learned so much doing that on Shopify that I was able to start offering that as a service. And then, also led into a couple of other really cool opportunities, again, just from like learning more about that, and providing that as a service. But, I got to meet some folks over, happened to connect with some folks over at Shopify because of it on the performance team. So that early on project, that was really big and helped kind of like not only launch my freelancing to full time, because it was a bigger engagement than I had ever had before, because it was 5 different brands, but all at once. So it was a much larger contract than what I was used to before with smaller jobs. And so that was one that was very impactful to me, both in the career, as a freelancer, but also just helping really open up my knowledge to a lot of these different things that we could be working on in Shopify specifically. Um,
awesome. That like the thing that you mentioned about speed optimization for Shopify, it does remember me of my first article that I wrote. It was like related to Shopify speed optimization back then, and it was
oh,
like the
nice.
first article that I read related to Shopify, and the one that got me started as a Shopify developer. Also,
That's
that's really
awesome,
good.
man.
Awesome. The other thing that I would like to ask you, it's currently you are currently getting lead from organic traffic, like just like from your website, from
Yes.
previous client recommendation. As a someone that would just like to start freelancer
Mhm.
in 2024, what type of strategy that you would like to suggest them to do?
Yeah, I mean, so my thoughts when I'm talking to people about they're first starting out freelancing, they're first starting out trying to provide services for people in web development, is this idea of building up, and I didn't really realize it until someone told me that was what I was doing, but building up a personal brand, right? So that you have to, when you're freelancing, get used to this idea of like you're in the spotlight, you are the face of your business, and those sorts of things. And so you have to get comfortable with that. It's very uncomfortable, but you have to get comfortable with it. And so if you're not, if you don't have projects that you're working on, if you're not working on client projects and client businesses, you need to be working on your business. Okay. And so you treat it as much as you can like a job where you're putting in that time. And so if you're trying to get leads still, things of this nature, my primary suggestions are go ahead. First and foremost, you need a website. You need one place where you can send people so that way they can contact you. So you should have a website with a contact form. It doesn't have to be complicated or anything like that. Just something as simple as, contact me to start your next project. I use on my website, get a free quote. And I believe that's because I had seen several other Shopify agencies that said like they did a bunch of testing, and that was the one that was the phrase specifically that converted the best. So that's just what I used. That's on my website and stuff like that. And so as far as like getting those initial leads there, but then so after you have that website, and it doesn't have to be super complicated. Some of us devs, like, we like to overcomplicate things. Clients aren't going to be able to appreciate technical prowess like on a website. They're just, in most instances, they're not, unless you're working with an agency or that's your target customer is trying to get hired by other agencies. That's just not something that's really going to be a thing for you. So, do something simple enough that showcases your knowledge and your expertise. Have a picture of you and your face so people know you're a real person. I can't tell you how many times people have said, they were just happy to see who the person was that they were going to be reaching out to. In a digital world, it's still important. People can put a face to the name, and have that contact form. That's all you need to get started. And then from there, I would recommend, LinkedIn. Honestly, as much as people like to talk negatively about it, but it's been great for me. From a freelancing perspective, you're gonna get bad leads. You're gonna get spam. You're gonna get all this other stuff that doesn't necessarily lead to projects, but you kind of have to sift through that. Sometimes that's just part of doing business, is kind of having to like weed through some of this stuff. And so you shouldn't let the negatives of that outweigh the value that you can find there. And so LinkedIn, first and foremost, get a professional looking photo and a tagline that says something specific to your expertise. Don't be I've talked to several other people before in the past who said, okay, well, I reached out to you because you said you're a web developer and Shopify expert, not that you were a web developer, Shopify expert, crypto expert, WooCommerce expert, and a big commerce expert. You didn't say you were these 15 things, right? It was just like very clear, like, this is all that I do. And so if you want to position yourself to get these kinds of jobs, pick a lane, so to speak, like pick what specialty you want and just stick with that. And then from there, like when you're creating content, when you're doing posts and stuff like this or whatever, just try to provide value. That's my goal. All the spaces that I'm in, anywhere I'm at, whether it's personally, physically, or online, digitally, I'm trying to provide value. So ultimately that leads to jobs. If people see you as somebody who provides a lot of value, who gives a lot of information away for free, is trying to be helpful, that makes people more comfortable hiring you for jobs, because you're giving this away for free. So you're showing your expertise there. You're also showcasing how you communicate. So that's another thing that clients are worried about a lot of times, is they don't want to hire a developer and then get talked down to because they're not technical enough or something like that. So when you're freelancing, you can't ignore the fact that, you're working with people. And so you have to do things in order to help encourage them to feel good about sending you money, right? And, you want to build trust to some degree, because merchants are trusting you with their entire website, right? Like how that is so much trust. They're handing over the keys to their entire business to you. And so, as developers, like, we need to honor and respect that as much as possible. But one way you can do that, like I said, providing content, just trying to be helpful online. Get involved in online groups. So like there are still like Facebook e-commerce groups kind of type thing. I don't really like to use Facebook personally, but there are a lot of groups that are focused on e-commerce there, for instance. And you'll see a lot of people on there. I don't know if you're in these, but people will comment. They'll ask some question and say, not really. People will ask questions and say, how do I do this relatively simple thing? And then you'll get a whole bunch of these comments of people saying like, I know the answer, DM me and hire me to get this done. It's like, don't do that. Like, what you don't want to come across like as super desperate here. Like, just be helpful. Everything else will come into place. And so when I see those, like, I'll just post a link to the docs and be like, here's how you get this done. Bam. And that's when we work plenty of times. Or even I had one where they were looking for a marketing referral, and in a group, and obviously you have all these people saying, oh, hire me, hire me, hire me. And I said, hey, I don't provide this service, but I've worked with these other agencies before and I know they do good work. And so I'd be happy to put you in contact with them. And they, reached out a couple weeks later to say, hey, we figured out our marketing lead, but we saw in your profile that you're a freelancer who does web development. Are you taking on work? And so I've worked with them now for like almost 3 years, just from that one little reach out of me just trying to be helpful. And so, if you're a new freelancer, you're trying to get leads, have that website up, but find other touch points online where other merchants hang out. LinkedIn's a good one, and then these e-commerce social groups in different places is a great one. And then when you are there, just try to provide value. Everything else ends up coming back to you that way. If you're putting out that, people talk about karma, call it whatever you want. When you're putting out like good value out there, you're showcasing how you want to be helpful. Jobs just start to come.
Yeah, that's true. I totally agree with you about all that point that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to be respectful and helpful to the merchant that you are trying to reach out to. And also one thing that I would like to also mention, it don't expect like instant gratification or instant lead
Yes.
when you are sharing helpful content, because it doesn't work like that. For example,
Mm-hmm.
for me, like I would like to share a simple story about me.
Yeah.
Like the first article that I wrote got me like a one lead after 6 months of publishing it. So
Uh-huh.
wait, in 6 months to be able to get one lead from an article that was after like a lot of like a comment, it was helpful them. So it does need to be patient and just like to be out there trying your, because you don't
Mm-hmm.
know which article, which Twitter post you will get viral or like, get lead from that. So you just need to be active, trying your best, and like just be patient. This is one of the things that you also need
Yes.
to be like paying attention to. And don't try to be able to spam people with your content, because you will lose like your reputation very quickly doing that.
Yes, that's a really great point, pointing out that it's not going to be like, oh, you're going to post something like, whether it be a blog post or yeah, a LinkedIn post, and someone's going to immediately say, oh, we want to hire you. I've had several people that have said, we've been following your content for months. We really appreciate it. We've learned a lot. Here's the issue that we're trying to tackle right now. And have gotten several paid engagements from that. So yeah, I agree. That's a really good point. Making sure that you don't, you see them more as like long-term strategies, and that's the idea, right? Like you're not building business for the short term here. A lot of people who are in these positions where, they immediately comment and say, hey, I can fix this for you. DM me to hire me or whatever in an e-commerce group. They're looking for the short, quick win, right? Maybe a small $100, $200 job here and there, but building your business for the long term, I think, is really where it comes in handy, because you're then making it much more sustainable. So the same thing as some of these other practices, trying to keep a long-term focus, with managing finances and everything else, kind of helps you weather those ups and downs. But that's a good thought. Yeah, putting that time in, creating content, but then wait and be okay with it. Good thought.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. And also one of the things that also I would like to add about the thing that you mentioned about getting lead, it's like for example being an expert in specific field and talk about it in all platforms. For example, you are a
Mm-hmm.
Shopify expert. In Twitter you will be talking about Shopify. In LinkedIn you will be talking about Shopify. In
Mm-hmm.
Instagram, even for example in my case Instagram also, I like a share story about Shopify, I talk about Shopify. So when a person like that will follow you in a platform like Instagram, LinkedIn, or Twitter, when they are thinking about Shopify, they will think about you instantly,
Yep.
because you are like sharing a lot of content related to Shopify. Like many people think I am working at Shopify, but I am not working at Shopify. I am a Shopify partner developer, and this is the goal: it's to be
Mm.
an expert in a specific field for Persian perspective. So if someone think about WordPress, they would immediately go to like let's say Zach. So Zach is a WordPress expert. When I'm taking a Shopify, you will go exactly to Tyler. So this is what you need to be thinking about
Mm-hmm.
in long term. It's not a short term, as we mentioned before.
Right. Right.
The other thing that I would like to point out, it's your podcast. So you are hosting a podcast called Liquid Weekly, where it's Shopify specifically. So can you tell us more about your podcast?
Yeah. So and it's really it's really Carl Meisterheim's podcast with Liquid Weekly, and I get to co-host it with him because he was gracious enough to let me come on and talk with people and stuff on a regular basis. So Carl has this grand idea when he started the Liquid Weekly newsletter of trying to create this space where it's the one-stop shop for Shopify development resources. So whether you're an app dev or a theme dev, headless dev, whatever you want to call it, right? If you're a developer that is working in the Shopify space, just having this one place where like all this content gets curated, because like we talked about, there's a lot of developers out here that are creating content. It's really, really good content, but it's hard to find everybody, right? It's kind of like scattered all over the place. And so you can do that in social media, you can do it in YouTube, you can do it on Twitter, but just trying to find a place where it's all in one spot is kind of hard. And so that was kind of why Carl had started the newsletter initially several years ago at this point now, where he kind of curates all this content, sends it out in a weekly newsletter. So you kind of just get this bam right in your inbox. And um, so he approached me sometime last year and talked about, hey, like what do you think about a podcast? Because I think this could be something that could be really helpful. And I said yes. I was like, that's great, man. I have been thinking about a podcast for a while, but as you know, right, podcasts are a lot of work. Like it takes a lot of time, just like not just like with the scheduling, the managing, but then there's editing and everything else that goes along with it. And I was like, I can't do this all by myself. And so up until that point, I knew it wasn't one more thing I could take on personally. But when Carl asked me about co-hosting a Liquid Weekly podcast, I was like, yes, absolutely. Like, and I'm totally on board with that. So the idea is that we're just, kind of extending, another platform here of Liquid Weekly, from the newsletter to now the podcast, where we're just talking about Shopify developer specific resources. And so, as you know too, because we're in the space, so we're looking for podcasts. If you're a podcast person, you're looking for podcasts related to Shopify and development, and there's really not a lot out there. There's a lot in marketing, there's SEO, paid ads, all this other stuff, even business basics and what have you, right? But there's not a lot from a technical perspective. So as far as what are the strategies that you need to look at when we're migrating from a vintage Shopify theme to an online store 2.0 theme, or how do we tackle checkout extensibility migrations from, we've got scripts and now we're moving to Shopify functions. So having a podcast where we can bring people on and talk with them about that was something that we were really thought the community needed, right? We needed some developer specific resource for that. And so the response has been really great so far. We actually didn't realize we'd have so many people say yes to being guests on the podcast. We thought initially, it was going to be something, it was just going to be me and Carl for a long time. But we just had people keep saying yes when we talked to them. And so we've had lots of amazing guests on there. And I hope that we're going to continue to have a bunch more amazing folks as well. We do have a couple of folks lined up. We were even fortunate enough to have some folks from Shopify come on. So the response to it's been amazing. But it's quite a bit of work. So it's been eye opening for me. Like even when it's Carl and I together. So I don't know how you do it. You're doing this all solo, man. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, there's a lot of behind the scene that we need to share about, like hosting a podcast that not a lot of people think about. It's the same for business, like being a freelancer.
Mm-hmm.
There is always like what people think versus what it's really like.
Right.
So because there's a lot of behind the scene when being a developer freelancer, is not only coding. So you need to make invoices, do with some legal stuff,
Yes.
also do some call that will end up not like making it to our client.
Mm-hmm.
So it will be like a time that you will like not be wasted, but it will be consumed from your day. So just need to be thinking about a lot of things. And this is why a freelancer like a charge higher than a regular full-time, because there is a lot of things that is included in the package. So emailing, doing call, discovery call, billing and legal stuff, accountant, and so on and so on. It's like a lot of things that is in behind the scene that people will like experience when they are like going through. Even if you are like share with them, sometime when people experience that, you will appreciate and also will know more about like what is real about being a developer and a freelancer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
this is really good point.
Yeah, that was
And
something that I think
sorry.
surprised me. I don't know about you when I first started. That was I thought I was going to get to like code like 8 hours a day, right? You think about like an office job or different things like that you have a full time job, and so you think, okay, well, if I'm a web developer, this is what I get to do all day. But it actually doesn't work out that way, right? Because you are running a business at the same time when you're freelancing, and so part of your day, good days now, like I'll get 4 to 5 hours of coding in. And then the other couple of hours, like you're working on, your business, as well. So like you gotta have both sides of things. There's the give and the take.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. There's a lot of things that you need to think about when you are a developer and a freelancer.
Hmm.
Like, as I'm currently not no longer, I will not call myself a freelancer because I'm currently a founding engineer in a startup, and
Uh-huh.
in my free time, I'm doing Shopify app development. So it's
Love it,
different
man.
now, but I can relate from my past experience as a developer slash freelancer. The other thing talking about freelancer is the Shopify Dev Alliance. So it's a developer Shopify specifically developer freelance community. It's a paid one, and I would like to get more detail about this one also.
Yeah, for sure, man. So this is one where I've really found a ton of value in the Shopify partner Slack. And this is free, so anyone who you sign up for a Shopify partner account, you can go directly to I believe the support on the left hand side in the menu there, and then there's a couple of links there where you can kind of like you can reach out to support, but there's also a link to join the Shopify partner Slack right there in your dashboard. And so there are loads of amazing developers in there. But it's a free community, and so with every free community, just like with social media and different things like this or whatever, you run into this whole issue where there's a lot of other not great signals, right? So whether it's people trying to message you just cold DMs to like outsource work to them, or trying to get you to join their partner program, to make commissions or whatever kind of type thing. And that's fine. I understand that those are strategies, but for a lot of people, I think that really turns them off, and it helps cloud kind of the ability to see the good value that's already there. And so the idea behind Shop Dev Alliance is it's going to be a freelance Slack community, and it is paid, and it's going to be paid for a couple of reasons. Primarily because we're going to promote the pro accounts on Slack, so that way we've got the Slack history, right? So that way it's not just like a free community where you lose like the last 90 days or whatever kind of type thing only. And then in addition to that, myself and co-founder David is going to are going to serve as moderators as well. So we're going to make sure that there is a code of conduct that is followed, and then when people don't adhere to that code of conduct, right, then they're just going to be removed from the community. And so we're going to do some other stuff in there as well. So kind of like this back and forth too. We're going to host some monthly type meetups as well, to where we can talk about specific topics. So kind of like best business practices as a freelancer. We're going to be able to share job opportunities and collaborate on different projects when people need kind of help getting solutions solved. So instead of you post something and you're trying to get a solution solved, asking other developers how they've done, you don't get a whole bunch of messages from other people saying, "Oh, I'm a developer, like pay me to do this and I'll do this for you." No, that's not. The freelance community, the developer community in general, is very giving. People create content all the time about things that they've learned in order to help other people, and so we want to make sure that those people have a place to connect specifically. And so I'm really excited for it. It's something that, again, I've wanted to start for a long time. I thought it would be a great to have kind of this moderated community. And so I'm getting a lot of experience here lately from being a freelancer to co-founding, or co-hosting different things. And so I was excited when David really resonated with this idea. David was previously, he's worked at agencies and different things like that. And he runs a very successful Shopify brand as well called Rainier Watch. And so it's this Mount Rainier out in, I believe it's Seattle, Washington area. And so, just he's built up this whole brand, and he's seen a lot of really good success there. And then after his agency job was done, he's started freelancing, and so he hasn't done a ton of the freelancing thing. He hasn't done a ton of Shopify dev, although he's done a lot of dev in other spaces, and he's a very very talented UI developer as well. And so just a lot of back and forth between the two of us. We kind of opened up a channel and just kind of communicated a lot. And I was giving insights on how to handle freelancing, whether it was invoicing or, client issues and things like this, how to quote projects and different things like that, stuff that you kind of like learn over time. And he just hadn't had the chance yet to flex that muscle. And so then when we were talking about it, I was like, man, this would be amazing to have, but in a wider format, like more developers that are able to like chime in here on this. And so I'm really excited, really to do that and try to compete with the level of value that's in the partner Slack, just without all the negative stuff. So I'm pretty excited. We're sending out emails. Actually, I started sending out emails today for people that had signed up and said that they were interested in learning more and stuff like that. So, but yeah, that's hopefully we're going to be up and running. I don't know when this podcast is going to come out necessarily, but hopefully we are up and running at that point completely.
Awesome. So for people that are interested about this stuff, I will be leaving the link to the all the things that we mentioned in this podcast episode in the show note for like Apple and the Spotify podcast, and for the YouTube video, it will be in the video description.
Awesome, man.
You are welcome. One of the things that you mentioned about the Shopify partner, the official one channel, like you mentioned, like getting spam from people trying to be able to reach out to you to be able to outsource work. It's like a sometime I like when I join like the platform, I got some message there, but sometime for me as a freelancer, like when you are reaching out to someone else for like a outsourcing work, one of the things that you need to be able to consider when you are reaching out is to be respectful of the person that you are reaching out, and also to not try to spam your messages. And for me, I don't recommend like a spamming people with that, because
Yes.
for me, when I saw the person like I reached out too much, like it's automatically it will be marked as spam for me, and you will lose reputation for like just like doing the spam thing. And for me as a freelancer, I used to be a freelancer, like a Shopify freelancer. One of the best strategy that worked for me, it's selling yourself without sounding that you are selling yourself. So it's
Yes.
providing, as you mentioned, content without like a spamming people, because people are people. If you spam like a lot of things, sometimes it does work, but a lot of time it will not work, and you will just lose your reputation for nothing. And the problem, it's your personal brand. It's not like just a company brand that you might shut off like a later on or something. It's your personal brand, so you need to
Right.
be like a very like a thinking about it very carefully, more than your like a company brand.
And I think something that's really worth noting here, like if we want to talk about, what we're talking about when we're talking about spamming, right? Like, so spamming, there's nothing wrong with cold outreach. Cold outreach is okay, right? But the idea of, spamming is more so when you're getting these messages from people who are just sending the same message to everybody with no idea, no personalization, no formal relationship whatsoever. And that, like, that is spam, right? And so there's a difference that you can tell versus, cold outreach. So cold outreach done well, okay, where it's not spam, is you're personalizing it to that individual, right? You're personalizing to that brand that you're reaching out. You're trying to get in touch with a stakeholder, somebody who's a decision maker at a company or what have you, and you are personalizing that, or you're establishing some sort of relationship with them prior to that. So it doesn't have to be this, fake whatever, like, oh, I saw this and I liked what you did, whatever, kind of thing. Like, be as genuine as possible and people will respond to it. But the spam thing, yeah, it's just somebody who's going through, whether it's on email or whether it's in a Slack, and they're just copying and pasting the same message to everybody that's in there. They're picking some channel where they've seen some back and forth, and they're just spamming everybody like that. That's spam, right? And so if you can, establish a relationship, I think when you focus first, and when we talk about providing value, and that being something that helps, if you focus first on helping other people build up themselves or build up their businesses before you're trying to, advance your own, I think that's when you start to see good results there. When people realize that you're invested in their progress, I think that's when people are much more comfortable. Because I've done that before, where people have just sent out or responded to the Slack channel something just like that was really helpful to me, or I'd go back and I've got this problem, and so I'm searching and I find somebody's response that actually helps solve my problem, and I'll message them and I'll be like, hey, thanks so much for sending this. Like, this was super helpful and helped me solve a problem today. Like, this is great. And that starts a relationship with that person. It might be 6 months down the road or 8 months down the road, and maybe I need help again. And I think of that person. I might reach out to them and be like, hey, can I pay for an hour of your time? Or they might think of me and be like, hey, like, I know you're working with these kinds of problems because you found value here. We actually need a little bit of help on this project. Can you send us a quote for 10 hours of work or something like that kind of type thing. So just trying to um, start those relationships with people, I think, instead of trying to just get those quick jobs. That's huge. So that's the difference, right, between spam and cold email done well. Personalization, authenticity. If you can't check those two boxes, then it's spam. Everything else, that's cold
Yes.
outreach done well.
I totally agree with you about this point. And when I was like mentioning this stuff, I was talking about spam, not call outreach,
Right,
because
right, right.
there's a big difference between them. As you mentioned, the other question that I have: what are the biggest challenge that you face when you are working as a freelancer,
Biggest
freelance
challenges.
developer?
Well,
Yeah.
I think probably biggest challenges. So some of the biggest challenges probably, very consistently handling the workload. When you're a freelancer is always a difficult thing. So you should have strategies set up in order to help manage that whenever possible. So what I mean by that is, like this idea, right, where it's raining, it's pouring kind of type thing, or like things are just like more dried up at that time. And I've been fortunate enough that I've had pretty consistent work, but there are plenty of times where I just have more inbound than I can handle. And so my strategies now are, obviously I try to schedule out. So some folks are willing to wait months to work with you, right? And so that's, be okay with that when that happens. Sometimes people, I think early on you get this mentality of like trying to manage client expectations. So maybe this is a big one too, where they'll say, hey, we need this job done quickly, and I know I can't get it done with my existing workload, but I really want to come through for them, and or I really don't want to lose the job. And so before, like, I would just say, okay, like, I'll do it, but then I'm working a lot more than I want to, and I'm probably not doing as good a job because I'm stretching myself so thin trying to get all of these projects done, right? And so I've gotten better over time at saying, you know what, like, I'm sorry, like, I am full up right now. I can start, 3 months from now if you're willing to wait that long. If not, plan B, I have people that I can refer you to that might have more immediate availability than me. And so that's always better. And I'm always surprised with people who say, like, oh, we're willing to wait. And then even if not, great, I can send work to some friends of mine who would also be able to do a really good job with this person. And so getting over the notion of oh no, like, I'm going to lose this job and now I'm not going to get that money, right? And so there's this work that I'm never going to get back. It doesn't work that way. The same thing with those friends that I refer to when I'm full. They end up having a job. Guess what? Like, sometime 6 months down the road from now, things are a little bit lighter for me and heavier for them. They refer jobs to me now. And so, it works that way. Again, like, when you focus on the relationship aspect and trying to help other people, everybody wins, right? When it comes to that, And so as long as you're honest with yourself about that. So for me, being honest, um, about my workload capacity and handling that properly, that's a challenge. I always think I'm more productive than I actually am. And so I have gotten better over time recognizing that, you know what, like, in order to do this job well, I don't have the time to devote to that. Let me try to help them by either asking them to wait or giving them another really solid referral that they can go to. That as far as like the biggest challenge, like that for me, when I break down a lot of issues over time, like, that's been one where I just have to acknowledge that I'm kind of the problem with that sometimes. And so that's something I've gotten better at over the years for sure. But that has been a constant struggle or challenge to make sure I can do that well.
Yeah, yeah, that's really important that you mentioned this point, because if you think about it, like when you have like a lot of project that is going on in the same time, and you have another client that would like to work with you with this workload, you are thinking that you will lose this client and you will lose the money that you will get from this client.
Right, right, right.
But if you end up getting this project and not doing a good job with this client. At the same time, you will be losing money, not losing money
Yep.
on like a instantly, but you will losing future work that might be getting from the same client, or from recommendation from this client. So if you think about it, it's the same, but just you need to be good enough to be able to tell if you can accept this product or not. So this is
Hmm.
a good point to be able to mention. And the last thing that I would like to mention is you can like share with us a resources link that will be helpful to the software engineer that they are looking to be able to get into entrepreneurship. So, and also you can share your social media
Yes.
links for people to follow you online.
Oh yeah, so I'll send you all the socials there. I'm probably most active on Twitter, as far as that goes. I mean, obviously the Shopify docs are a really good one. The one that I've been recommending a lot lately for a Shopify developer specific resource has been the workshops website that they have, where they just have a couple of like really handy tutorials to walk through some of the new stuff. And especially like if you're a front end dev, primarily like me, trying to break into like back end stuff, looking at extensions only, checkouts, apps for Shopify Plus merchants. That's a great resource as well. So I'll send you those for sure, so that you can include those as well. So, but I mean, in general for entrepreneurship, and I'm trying to think of like a good series of resources. Some of the best ones, as far as if you're looking to freelancing in general, Kelly Vaughn's "Start Freelancing Today." She has an ebook for that, and so if you're just really good as far as getting some basic business practices started, if you're trying to provide like if you're a service based business where you're trying to like freelance or be a contractor or whatever, a lot of really good stuff is in there. Everything that Kelly does is awesome and amazing. So she's not doing as much Shopify stuff as she used to now, but she's still, obviously all of her stuff is still fantastic as far as that goes. And then a book that I would really recommend people read would be the Profit First book. I'm not sure if you've read this, but as far as when we were talking about managing finances as a freelancer, and it applies to all businesses, but setting up your businesses and kind of understanding maybe how much money you can spend in different areas, and just how to kind of manage your finances while you're actively running a business. It is very, very helpful, for me at least, when I was first kind of like getting into freelancing. And it's where I kind of came up with this concept of how I manage my own finances as well. So that to me, very, very helpful as well. So I mean, I would really, really recommend that for people looking just to entrepreneurship in general, because learning how to manage your finances is a really big deal. I'm reading through a couple of other business books, and that just be my recommendation for a lot of people. Read business books if you're not a business person. I certainly wasn't, and that was a surprisingly challenging hurdle when starting freelancing as a web developer, was the fact that, oh, I forgot, like I'm actually going to need to know how to run a business here too. So some of those resources are going to be really helpful, not just to freelancers and web developers who are freelancing, but just people in general who are running businesses. General business practices or whatever can be very, very, very helpful there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all these resources. So that's it for this episode. I hope you find it useful. So don't forget to follow us on all social media platform. We are on Twitter mainly, and also you can listen to the podcast Spotify, Apple Podcast, and also we added Amazon Music. And also you can support us on our page, so you can check out yallaletscode.com, a page where you can find all the episode, and there is a button to be able to support the show that we currently just released. And thank you so much, Taylor, for your time and for this great episode.
Yeah, thanks so much, man. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.